Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced today that cities opposing immigration raids can expect a different kind of raid on their finances. In a press conference, Sessions said sanctuary cities will lose millions of dollars in federal funds supplied by the DOJ.
The American people are not happy with these results. They know that when cities and states refuse to help enforce immigration laws, our nation is less safe. Failure to deport aliens who are convicted of criminal offenses puts whole communities at risk.
Well, by happy coincidence, today was also the start of the first ever Sanctuary Cities Conference. Such a thing exists. Politicians from around the country converged on New York to discuss strategies for ignoring and subverting our country's immigration laws. We'll talk to one of the conference speakers in just a minute. But first, here is Fox News senior correspondent Rick Leventhal, who was inside the Sanctuary Cities Conference. Hey, Rick.
Hey, Tucker, they say there's no such thing as a coincidence, so we're not really sure why the AG chose today to speak out against sanctuary cities at the same time that this first ever national conference supporting sanctuary cities was getting underway. But that's exactly what happened. A group of politicians and activists very, very opposed to the Trump administration's immigration policies. They say their goal is to support undocumented immigrants and find legal avenues not to cooperate with ICE, to protect school and other records, and limit the sharing of information with the feds.
January 20th was a tragic, tragic day for our nation. But January 21st was far more important. And we look forward to working with all of you to write the next chapter in our nation's history.
Trump declared war on all of us, on who we are, who we love, what we stand for. And because this administration represents such an existential threat, we have seen a tremendous upswelling of public resistance.
This conference is being led by the Speaker of the New York City Council, who says that sanctuary cities are actually safer than non-sanctuary cities, and she says that the President and Attorney General have no right to withhold funds from places that fail to comply with the law.
New York City is the safest city in this country. And so, you know, if the President wants to put that at risk to make a point to a dwindling base of support, then he is being extremely irresponsible, but that's nothing new for this administration.
This conference continues tomorrow morning, Tucker. One of the panel discussions is titled Reducing the Risk of Deportation.
Rick Leventhal in New York. Thanks, Rick. President of the Latino Victory Fund, which aims to increase Hispanic voter turnout for the sake of achieving liberal policy objectives. He's attending the conference, and he joins us now. Cristobal, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So it's quite a conference, according to some of the remarks that we have here. So the head of the New York City Council, Melissa Mark Viverito, said that enforcing our immigration laws, said this at the conference, American immigration laws was tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Do you agree with that?
I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that the speaker invited us to this amazing conference, which is the first of its kind in the country. The idea behind the conference was to bring together local officials from around the country to develop policies that will strengthen sanctuary city policies and protect immigrants. And the speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito, is a champion for progressive values, a champion for immigrants. And the point that she was trying to make is that sanctuary cities are actually much safer. And what Jeff Sessions and what this Department of Justice are trying to do is pass draconian laws that will make it much harder and unsafe for our citizens in the United States.
I've heard this before, and just to be clear, there's no social science to support your position on that. There are no actual studies that show a sanctuary city is safer. Sorry, but I want to get back to what she said. No, well, there's no disagreement. I mean, there haven't been studies on that show it.
Well,
and
let
if you
me
have
just
I'd
correct
love to
you
see
there.
it.
Sure. I mean, I can talk about it right now. The most comprehensive study to date is the University of California study done by Ted Wong. It basically looked at sanctuary cities across the country, and it said that there's 35.5 fewer crimes committed per 10,000 in sanctuary cities than non-sanctuary cities. It also said it's even better in smaller municipalities, and importantly, sanctuary cities have stronger economies, lower poverty rates, lower uninsured rates.
I'm sorry, I don't want to waste either one of our times here. That's not causation. There's no established connection between those two. It's merely speculative. But I want to get back to what the head Well, it is. I mean, that hasn't been proved. So, like, that's just the state of play here.
Well,
but let's get back to what she said.
I hate to push back, but look at New York City, for example. This is the safest big city in the country.
I get it. I've lived in New York.
City.
I'm not denying, but there's no evidence that one causes the other. So let's not waste our time. I want to get back to what. But by the way, this is an interesting conversation. I don't understand why it needs to be a racial conversation. I don't understand why, if you disagree with someone on immigration policy, that person needs to be a racist, needs to be committing ethnic cleansing. And the head of the New York City Council made that claim today. You don't speak for her, but I want to know what you think of that.
Well, I greatly respect the head of the New York City. She's amazing. She's an incredible leader. She's the first Hispanic to ever hold that position, and I look forward to seeing what she does next in her career. But the point that the conference is trying to get across is that sanctuary cities ultimately are not going to resolve the problem that we've got here. I think you and I can both agree
but that's not the point.
that the problem is around comprehensive immigration reform. And we've got to pass that.
Do me the favor of addressing what she actually said.
You'll need to ask her directly.
It was ethnic cleansing. Okay, but do you think that why does it always take a turn into racial demagoguery? You're accusing Trump of being a racial demagogue, and then when people say things like ethnic cleansing, murdering people because of their race, come on now.
Look,
that's a horrible thing to say.
I'm not going to speak for the speaker, but what I will say is this. The evidence which we just debated shows sanctuary cities are safer, but ultimately the reason why we're having this debate today is because of what happened on Friday. On Friday, you had President Trump and the Republican Congress have the most colossal failure that we've seen to pass a major milestone legislative piece, and that's Trump Care. They couldn't pass it after 7 years of complaining about it. And so to change the subject, what they've done is to pivot immediately on Monday to attack the vulnerable. Again, that's the immigrants, and that's part and parcel of what this administration does.
Spare me the political analysis. I mean, whatever you think of these policies, you disagree. He's been talking about them since the first day he announced for president. So you can't say this is something he came up with yesterday in order to divert attention from something from which everyone is obviously paying attention. But here's my question: what is the effect on people already in this country? What do you make of the effect? We know for a fact that when you flood the zone or a labor market with lower wage labor, it depresses wages. That's called supply and demand. You're familiar with that, I know, as an educated man.
We just had a debate about the economy in these sanctuary cities, and they're better in these sanctuary cities. So I think that creates a new question, which I think ultimately we've got to answer that together, which is
depresses wages for everyone, including naturalized immigrants, and I'm wondering if you care.
Well, here's the thing. I disagree with you. And you mentioned,
how can you disagree with that?
Hold on. You mentioned you used to live in New York City. Here's the thing. In New York City, and you've seen this on the subways, there's a campaign. It says, see something, say something. And what these policies that are designed to defund and take money away from local police do is it means instead of see something, say something, you see something and don't say anything because immigrants are going to be afraid to go to law enforcement.
Right.
And so this is the height of hypocrisy. If you want to make these local communities safer, you move resources to local law enforcement. You don't take resources away from local law enforcement.
The government is making a pretty clear argument, which is obey our laws or don't take our money. And that seems like a pretty reasonable argument. If you're living in your parents' house and they say there's a curfew at 11 and you come home at 12, you shouldn't be surprised when they say get your own apartment. I mean, that's kind of the argument here. It's not about law enforcement or safety. My question to you is, what's a good number? We've got about 11 million people at least living here illegally. How many do you think we should have?
Look, to your point about saying if you don't follow my rules, I'm going to take away your money. This is the first time I think that I can think of where conservatives around the country who have fought for state rights and have fought for federalism say all of that applies except when it comes to immigration.
Well, don't hang that. I'm not here to speak for conservatives. I'm asking you a simple question.
Look,
and the question is this: what's a good number? We have about 11 million, we think. We don't know, but we think it's about 11 million people here illegally. No other country has that many. No other country, as you well know. What's a good number for us? At what point should we say that's too many or not enough?
Here's what I will say. Obviously, sanctuary cities are not the ultimate fix for this broken immigration system. Congress, even though this Congress can't get it done, Republicans control every branch of government. They can't pass Trump Care. But at the end of the day,
stop with the propaganda.
At the end of the day, you're going to have to pass a law to fix this system.
Okay, but
so I'm not a policymaker. I'm not going to tell you.
No, you're not a policymaker. You're a policy advocate who is pushing for a certain set of positions based on your beliefs. And my question as an American citizen is, how many illegals in this country is too many? Have you given that any thought at all? Since you're pushing for more tolerance of illegals, what would be a good number for us? Should we have 22 million? Is 10 too many? What's your view of that?
Look, this is a country built on immigrants. Immigration is the fabric
is
of
the
our
country
nation.
built on illegal
The
immigrants?
country
Really?
is the strongest country in the world because of immigration. And so, yes, instead of building walls, we should be building bridges. We should be fixing our immigration system.
I'm sorry. I'm getting frustrated because you guys always fall back on these bumper stickers. Do you ever engage with the ideas? Do you ever think, my job is to advocate for illegal aliens? How many should we have? Do you ever, work through what you actually believe, or do you always go back to we're a nation of immigrants and we should build bridges, not walls? I mean, I'm sincerely asking you that.
Look, you and I have some strong disagreements when it comes to immigration.
We're not even disagreeing. You're not even answering.
You're completely entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. And the facts say that cities that are sanctuary cities do better in the economy.
Okay, but that's
the
yet
country
another
does
cliche.
better
I'm
with
just going to ask you.
It's
I'm going to
the
ask you
truth.
one last time. Do you think 11 million illegals is a lot? Why doesn't any other country have that many? And how many should we tolerate before we say that's too many?
What I'll say is that the immigration system is broken. We need to welcome immigrants in this country, and that's what makes this country strong.
Okay. Mr. Criswell, Mr. Alex, rather, thanks a lot for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Up next, we've reported heavily on the rape case in Rockville, Maryland, the appalling one. Now, Congress is getting involved. We'll talk to a congressman, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, in fact, who wants to know why an 18-year-old illegal alien was placed in the 9th grade in the first place. Maryland will recur again and again.
Maryland is talking about a state law to make the state a sanctuary state. The governor is opposed to that, I'm glad to hear. That would be such a mistake. I would plead with the people of Maryland to understand that this makes the state of Maryland more at risk for violence and crime, that it's not good policy.
Congressman Bob Goodlatte of Virginia is chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, not a small job. His committee is trying to find out why the 2 Rockville rape suspects were able to settle in the United States in the first place, since neither appears to have been here legally. The chairman joins us now. Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming on.
Great to be with you, Tucker, and your viewers.
Well, no offense to you who works in the government, but it seems like government is heavily implicated in this story. Both these guys were in government custody, one of them at least 4 times. And yet I don't hear anybody talking about the failures of the U.S. government to keep its population safe.
Well, it's an absolute failure of the U.S. government. No question about it. A failure of the Obama administration to enforce our immigration laws. And I love hearing Jeff Sessions talking about respect for the rule of law and abiding by the law and protecting people and keeping them safe. This is a totally preventable crime that occurred in Maryland, and it happens all over the country, and it happens very frequently, and it is the result of sending the message, not just here in this country, but to Central America and elsewhere in the world. You come to our border, we're going to release you into the interior of the country. And that is now changing with this new administration, and it's actually very exciting. We've seen a steady decline, a 40% decline in February of border apprehensions, a 60% decline in March. And if they keep enforcing the law and keep sending people home where they belong, particularly these unaccompanied minors, when you pick them up at the border, you should make sure they're safely returned home as rapidly as possible. That's certainly not what was done in the Obama administration. They wound up more than 2,000
miles from where they entered. It's not clear how they did that. It's also not really clear how old they are. One of them is being treated as a minor because he says he's 17. How exactly would we know that, necessarily?
They often don't know because they show up at our border without any kind of documentation in most instances. They're then processed and released into the interior of the country. One of these 2 young people was held for a few weeks and then released. The other was released in a few days. And they were I think actually delivered by our government, one to a father, one to an uncle. I understand the father has now been arrested by ICE, or actually by the local sheriff in Maryland, and is going to be turned over to ICE to be processed, to be deported out of the country, because the child was turned over to a father who was unlawfully present in the United States. They're both headed home, I hope.
It doesn't seem like anyone cares. I mean, all the focus in the press and on the other side of the aisle seems to be on the victims of enforcement of immigration laws, but it somehow is bad manners to mention the Americans hurt by the consequences of this. Why is that? You're in the Congress every day. What do you think that's about?
First of all, I don't think it's true that no one cares about this. I think a lot of people care about it, and I think that's one of the main reasons why Donald Trump is president of the United States today. So I think
but the press doesn't care. I mean, it's considered bad form, or you're a nativist if you point this out, something that actually happened?
You know, I've had some reporters from the Rockville area and the D.C. area, as a matter of fact, covering this story, show some real concern about the consequences of this case. I think it brings it home to people that this kind of thing can happen when you don't enforce our immigration laws and we don't respect the rule of law.
Can the feds really shut off the financial tap to cities that ignore federal law?
Absolutely. I'm sure that the liberals meeting in New York will encourage some of these cities to fight it every step of the way, so we're headed back to court, no doubt. But the law is very clear that you are required to cooperate, and even the last Attorney General acknowledged to our chairman of our Appropriations Subcommittee with regard to these funds that those funds could and should be cut off if cities did not cooperate.
We'll see. Bob Goodlatte, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Tucker.
Awful rape case in Rockville, the worse it gets. Last week, we told you how Montgomery County School Superintendent Dr. Jack Smith threatened to call the police on parents who dared complain about the enormous illegal alien population in their school district. We also share with you details of Mr. Smith's employment contract, which grants him a huge salary and luxurious benefits in return for stifling dissent and making the schools worse. Well, there's more. It turns out the alleged rape isn't Rockville's first major incident this year. According to local attorney Renee Sadler, just a week before that alleged rape took place, a 17-year-old girl at Rockville High School was jumped, beaten, and kicked in the head multiple times by an assailant she said she'd never even seen before. The assault lasted long enough to leave significant injuries on her and for several other students to record the attack on their phones without trying to help in any way. This in a school that until recently was considered safe. But here's the most shocking part. Following the assault, Rockville's parents were not informed of any of it, nor were the police. Instead, the school contacted only the girl's parents, who had to call the cops themselves. This attack, by the way, came one day after another fight at the school, which parents also were kept in the dark about. Too bad the assailants didn't criticize illegal immigration or say something politically incorrect while pummeling their fellow students. That would have gotten the attention of Dr. Jack R. Smith. He might have called the cops himself. By the way, the attorney of the family we just mentioned will be on this show tomorrow with more details, so stay tuned for that.
We're also investigating leaks as it relates to Russia. Now, as you know, just recently last week I found out that there was additional information that came forward to me that had nothing to do with Russia, but has everything to do with whether or not Americans were masked properly or, in fact, unmasked. And I'm very concerned about that.
By surveillance.
Now, the Trump-Russia story now exists in 3 different realities. That was House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes on O'Reilly a few minutes ago. He's saying he has seen strong evidence that President Trump was spied upon by the Obama administration, but none that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government. Meanwhile, Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin says he has seen, quote, damning evidence of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign, but he says journalists will likely publish it in the near future. The rest of us are stuck in a third reality with no proof for either claim. Perhaps Congressman Pocan can change that. He is on the set tonight. Congressman, good to see you.
Yeah, thank you, Tucker. Glad to be here.
So the concern here, I think, on the left and on the right, too, and my concern is that all of this stuff undermines people's faith in a system that is built on faith, essentially. So given that, does it really help to say, for either side, Republicans too, I've seen secret documents I can't tell you about, we're going to wait till it's leaked. Why don't we just all be quiet until the evidence emerges?
Well, or I think what 2/3 of the people in America want, let's have an independent commission come in. It's in the best interest of everyone, and get this resolved so we can move on with things. But the problem is you've got the classified document by 17 intelligence agencies that I've read and reread parts of it. You've got the separate dossier by some British person I don't even refer to, although some of those things have been proven to be true. And then you've got some work that journalists are doing, things like what they had around the Attorney General, that he indeed had some contacts during the campaign. And you're right, there's a lot of information out there right now, but that's why it's in everyone's best interest to have an independent commission separate from Congress come in and take a look at all of this, and then we can move on. And that's what the public's really asking for.
But you know what's really going on, which is the NSA, the National Security Agency, has all the data on everything. They've tapped into the trunk lines, every email communication in the United States, every phone call. Maybe some of our thoughts are being recorded and stored by the NSA. So they know exactly the degree to which the Russians interfered or didn't, the degree to which the president was spied upon during the campaign or not. Why doesn't the Intel Committee in the House and the Senate say, produce the documents now? Now.
Yeah, well,
and the president should say that too.
And it would have worked perfectly that way had, especially on the House side, the head of the Intel Committee not kind of stumbled through this process. And the fact that, just last week he, is getting documents on White House grounds, and then he's announcing and giving to the White House the next day. I mean, he's put himself in a point where he's going to have to recuse himself from all this, which is why an independent commission, which is exactly what the American public wants, makes the most sense. Because it's in the best interest for the Trump administration, right? If there's nothing to be had out there, then let's have that independent commission come in.
Let's be honest. I mean, look, I've had Schiff on this show, Congressman Schiff of Burbank, who's on the Intel Committee, and I asked a couple pretty normal questions. I thought, like, where's the evidence, for example? And he called me an agent of the Kremlin. This is clearly a guy who's totally partisan, which shouldn't surprise us. Congress is about partisanship. So why are we pretending we're surprised that Nunes is a Democrat and Schiff is a Republican and Schiff is a Democrat? I mean, like, this is what it is, but we can still get information, can't we? And why don't we wait until it's actually produced?
But that, I would argue, is exactly why you want an independent commission to come in and take advantage of looking at it without having the partisanship. Because I think the American public, you rarely see, 66% say they want to do something like this because there is so much information. I mean, I can tell you from what I've read, anyone who read the classified report, including people like John McCain and plenty of others, your natural reaction should not be to say, let's lift sanctions. And yet that's exactly what the Trump administration did. So I think what we have got some concerns, that was way before we found out all the connections between campaign people on the Trump campaign, administration officials.
Maybe he thought our Russia policy was silly. I mean, he said that in every speech that I covered a lot of his speeches. He said, look, we can make common cause.
And I can tell you, if you had the opportunity, Tucker, I wish you'd join me, and I've asked for that classified report to be declassified because I think you can take away where our sources came from. I think that's the biggest concern the intelligence community has, and show all that information that I've seen, because let's let the American people make the decision and have an independent commission.
But you know what? I don't think I need to be in the Intel Committee to be convinced. So why don't you explain to me precisely how the Russians altered the outcome of that election? And if they were so deeply involved, what happened in California, for example? They don't get Russian propaganda there? Why did Hillary win by almost 4 million votes if it was that effective an operation, win the popular vote?
Yeah, so I think the parts,
the
parts that have been unclassified have clearly said, the intelligence community has said, that the Russian government, led by Putin, specifically interfered with the election. They wanted Donald Trump to win, and a lot of the details is some of the stuff that's still going to come out and is still coming out. But you've got to admit, you look at this.
Well, I'll just name one. That's it. That's all I want. Look, foreign governments try to interfere with every single process in American life all the time, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're everywhere. They live in my neighborhood.
But we've never had anyone interfere with the U.S. election like Russia has right now.
How exactly did Russian activity move a single vote? And do we have evidence that? You don't need to have access to classified documents to know that.
But actually, you do. I think some of the information that's...
Can you give me a hint?
No, because
like
I've sworn an oath. That's part of the thing. So here's what I went on the floor of Congress and said, let's declassify that report. Because if we can, again, protect the sources, which I think is the main concern they have, let the American people see everything and make the decision.
I get all that, and I understand.
Well, the allegation is what the intelligence community said. They have come in and done through multiple ways, try to influence the election.
But name one that actually had any effect. That's it. You don't need to have any classified information revealed to say that. You could say,
well, you do. In some cases, you do.
How about any case at all?
Tucker, I wish you could read the classified report. I wish the American people could, because I think if they saw that and the new information that journalists are coming out, like Jeff Sessions, who lied to Congress, saying that he never met with any Russian officials, and maybe 2 or 3 times.
Oh, the meeting that was set up by the Obama administration at the Republican convention?
I'm talking about the 2 or 3 contacts.
The one that was set up by the Obama administration.
At the Republican convention, when multiple people
by the Obama State Department set up that meeting.
When multiple people had the contacts.
It's so dumb.
But how about the idea that when FBI Director Comey said that the Trump administration has been under investigation because of collusion, that means something. Now, I wish we would have known that before the election.
Well, it means
a lot
of things, but I don't think, whatever, that's a whole separate conversation.
But that's why the independent commission is the smartest way to proceed.
We need an independent commission because we need to safeguard our elections. I think you've sponsored legislation to that effect, too.
Yes.
There's no evidence in the public view that shows a single vote changed by Russian interference. There's a ton of evidence showed that votes have been changed and affected because we don't have voter ID laws in a lot of states. Well, so if you really care...
I would actually disagree with you with that. In fact, I got PolitiFacted on that one.
In the city of Detroit,
I said my statement based on the numbers was you're more likely to get struck by lightning than commit voter fraud. No, and I got a true out of PolitiFact. They don't like to give out trues because the reality is...
What does that even mean? In the city of Detroit, in the 2016 election, 1/3 more votes were cast than there were registered voters. So, like,
that happens on a regular basis because you have new voters and people who move get considered a new voter.
That may be
that's how the numbers
right.
work.
No,
that's just how the process is. That's not a damning statistic.
Well, it might be or it might not be. We don't know. And we also don't know why a certain number of dead people vote to this day in states across the country. So, like, why wouldn't you have a voter ID law? I don't get that.
Well, first of all, I don't know how a voter ID law would change Russia interfering with our elections. But I do think if you had an independent, then let's have the independent commission come in and see if Russia indeed had fake voters coming in. I don't think they're going to find that. But let's go ahead. If that's your idea
of people voting who shouldn't have voted, I don't think it was millions of them. I don't agree with the president on that. But there were certainly a lot of them.
But you don't
if you care, why not shut that down?
But Tucker, don't you think if 2/3 of the American public and leaders in both parties think an independent commission makes sense?
Back to the commission again.
Pardon?
We're back to the commission again. Okay, you're for the commission.
Facts. So let's get the facts.
I mean, I have facts here.
I know you want to go to. You want to change the subject to photo ID, but I would much rather talk about.
It's the same theme, which is how do we protect our fragile system?
But how can you allow another government to interfere with your elections?
Because you provided no evidence that they did, and not one person has provided one piece of evidence that affected the outcome.
The evidence will continue to come out.
Here every night, 9 to 10 Eastern, and you're welcome to join.
Join me in asking for that to be declassified.
I'm sure you'll leak it to someone soon anyway. I can't wait to talk about it when you do.
We'll get the information.
Thank you, Congressman. Good to see you.
Thank you.
People are afraid and people are not united. Great Britain is more disunited. It is absolutely divided more than any time in its past.
Well, that was DailyMail.com global columnist Katie Hopkins talking about the London terror attack on this show last week. In response, Londoners just about lost their minds. One called Hopkins a gargoyle. Piers Morgan called her a doom-monger. She was even likened to a Nazi sympathizer by Harry Potter creator J.K. Rowling, who's an avid tweeter. She tweeted, quote, "As Fox News and Katie Hopkins tell the world that terror is cowing London, I remember pro-appeasement U.S. Ambassador Joseph Kennedy in 1940, which makes her both very old and also a non-linear thinker." What does that even mean? Is Katie intimidated by all of this? She joins us now to tell us. Katie Hopkins, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So apparently the column that you wrote and the conversation that we had were reported as hate crimes in Great Britain?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. The column I wrote, which was really quite heartfelt, about walking through the city after the attacks, feeling ourselves being pushed under by a terrorist. It was kind of a soft, thoughtful piece. That's been reported repeatedly as a hate crime against this country. And Londoners have completely lost their mind about me speaking out, about me failing to stick to the song sheet that we've been issued, because I don't say we stand united, because I will not say we are not cowed, because I'm speaking out about the fact that I believe this was all about Islamic terror and it sits with the Muslim community. London has absolutely lost the plot. They are mad as a box of frogs.
What happened to your island, which gave the world freedom of speech and was, you know, the embodiment of pluck and vigor and toughness and self-sufficiency, and took over the whole world? And now you're being called a hate criminal, and your Twitter's trying to censor you? Like, what happened exactly?
Yeah, and that's nothing new for me. You know, these liberals will come at you any way they can. They report me to social services about my children. They have reported me to the Major Crime and Homicide Command. I've been interviewed under caution. That's kind of standard stuff for me. I don't mind. You know, J.K. Rowling writes for children, and she writes about a fantasy land. Now, she wants to believe a fantasy land where we're all getting on well together and it's a brilliant, marvellous place, and it's absolutely fine, no problem that someone mows down people as they cross a bridge. You know, we'll leave that up to J.K. Rowling. People have said to me, look, Katie, we survived the Blitz. You know, we can survive this. This is nothing. Well, you know, in the Blitz, we were fighting for something. We were defending our great country. As far as I see it, London, which is really Obama on steroids, London are accomplices in wanting this country to fail. And that's why you'll see on Wednesday, when we finally kickstart the process of leaving the European Union, the rest of the UK, which is essentially Trump Town, where I belong, we are leaving the EU. We will stand defiant. We will stand up for Great Britain. London, Obama on steroids, completely different place, lost to the liberals who want to deny this attack had anything to do with Islam at all, and in fact have come out on the other side saying, we must stand up and defend the Muslim community.
Well, and that is the difference between what's happening now in the Blitz. And the Blitz, of course, Great Britain was attacked from another country, not from within. So what's been the response from the British government to this?
It's been incredible, actually, to see this kind of diversionary tactics that are being used. You know, basic questions, difficult questions that we need answers. They're in my dailymail.com column that's up online right now. Difficult questions like, what happened in prison to that man to turn him from Adrian into Khalid? Why was he in Saudi for a number of short visits? He said he was teaching English. Why is it that the police are determined he was a lone attacker when, in fact, when he came back from Saudi, he went to live in an extremist community, living amongst a group that is now banned for being extreme in their nature? And why is it that he was on the periphery of MI5's intelligence, but he's not even on the list of 3,000 very dangerous criminals, homegrown terrorists waiting to attack within weeks? And I suppose the most difficult question of all, if Khalid is not on that list of 3,000 terrorists looking to attack within weeks, how many other Khalids are out there in this country that here, London, Obama on steroids, doesn't want to admit or be honest about?
But those aren't the questions I've seen raised. I've seen the British government claim that the rest of us have too much privacy in our texting and
yes.
social media.
And, you know,
fault.
the questions they want. Of course, they want to talk about, you know, what's up, and did he send a message just before he decided to go over the bridge? You know, was he on Google? Did he need a lesson on how to stab people? Did he get that from Google? Anything, diversionary tactics. They're running around like ants in the sun under a magnifying glass about a load of piffle and waffle to stop people like me asking the difficult questions, which is how many more Khalids are out there, and how many more times are we going to get stood on like a bunch of ants? Because you know what ants do when they get stood on? They carry on as normal and they wait for the next footstep to fall. And I refuse to be part of that.
So we're almost out of time, but give me your one-sentence response to J.K. Rowling.
Darling, carry on writing your Fantasyland books. If you think England is united, that's a fantasy as well. And seeing as you're such a big fan of migrants, why not spend some of your billions in homing those migrants while you're at it?
Katie, it's great to see you, as always. Thank you.